Hello, everyone. Welcome to the panel on Powering Up Rare Diseases with AI. My name is Caroline Hargrove. I look after technology and AI for Babylon Health in London. And I'm very, very pleased to be your host on the panel for what I hope will be a very interesting discussion. I'll briefly introduce actually let the panelists introduce themselves in a second, but just to let you know that after that, I will ask a few questions and then we'll open the discussion more broadly to people who have questions, which I will ask them. And so, so our topic is rare diseases and how can technology help? Because obviously rare diseases by definition are rare, but they're not uncommon. There's a lot of people who will suffer from rare diseases. It's just that they're different from one to the other. And this is the kind of subject where AI might really help doctors improve what often is the first hurdle, which is diagnosis. So on that one, our first panelist to introduce himself would be Rudy Benfredj, who is CEO of Mendelian. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Rudy, please?
Sure. Thank you very much, Caroline. Hi, everyone. Very, very happy to be here. Very happy to be back. I came here on RAREfest, quite a different setting, clearly, but still very excited. Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you just a little bit about myself and a little bit about what we do. Yeah, my name is Rudy Benfredj. I'm a computer scientist, actually, by background. I really wanted to be a doctor, and my mother was really pushing for that one. But then I managed to convince her by telling her that maybe in 20, 30 years, the best doctors in the world may be computer scientists. So I went for that. I started working in rare disease almost 5 years ago now. It's a really interesting and really beautiful industry, I think, for so many reasons. I think first reason of it is clearly the community, as today is a great example of that. But yeah, I think as what we do at Mendelian, we're very focused on one thing, which is really the diagnosis part. So we don't do anything around treatment or anything that is kind of post-diagnosis. We just look at the diagnosis pathway and how can we reduce this as much as possible. And so throughout the years, we've used technology and digital health really in different ways just to find new almost channels and mediums, new features, so that we could reduce this diagnostic odyssey that we are all very familiar with. And it took us quite some time. We're doing this all in the UK. It's a tricky sometimes environment to navigate. The NHS is beautiful, but can sometimes be a little bit interesting to work with. And so for the first few years of the company, we really just started by the technology, understanding what is it that was available to us, what is it that we could be doing using the latest kind of state-of-the-art digital tools that we had to reduce this diagnostic odyssey. And then slowly we started creating our link and our network with the NHS, and we've really all the stakeholders around the table in rare disease, whether it's the patient advocacy group, whether it's the pharma, whether it's the top consultants in all of the NHS. And we're very lucky, I think, in the UK, some of the national experts in the NHS are in most cases international experts for their rare disease. So I think we always have to recognize that we're pretty lucky to be here. And very quickly we realized that the more impact, the earlier we were going to be able to impact the patient, the better it's going to be. And so we started looking at primary care particularly and understanding how we could streamline this clinical pathway so that the referral are being done maybe in a more streamlined way, in a more efficient way, so that there would be fewer misdiagnoses, so that there would be more effective treatments the first time around. And we started working with that concept of how many years of diagnosis odyssey could we reduce. And so we iterated quite a bit on the technology first, by looking at kind of our fake patients and our fake data, because this was the only way that we could test and try on technology. And then slowly we gained a bit of credibility by publishing a couple of papers and really putting ourselves out there. And I would say that about a year or 2 years ago, we really kind of leveled up and we started a partnership with the NHS. So today we are integrated within the NHS and we start using some of our technologies really embedded into the clinical pathway of primary care clinics in a couple of localities in the NHS. And yeah, I'll be happy to tell you a little bit more about exactly how it works if there's some questions around that. But you know, mostly it's been quite a journey, quite a ride, and you know, we're starting to see how I would say how optimistic we should be and we can be now, looking at rare disease odysseys and how we're going to be able to reduce that really to a minimum throughout the years. So thanks a lot for having me. I really look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Rudy. Now I'll move over to Simone Manso. Simone, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, and thanks, Rudy. What you do, it's extremely important on the diagnosis side. We focus more on treatment, but I've been also part of some misdiagnosis, so I know exactly what it means. And yeah, it's really good. So Simone Manso, and thanks everyone for having me here. It's a great pleasure. I am the head of neurofibromatosis strategic partnerships at Healx. Neurofibromatosis is a disease that is very close to my heart. And I also serve the Children Tumor Foundation, the leading not-for-profit in the neurofibromatosis field, as a member of their board of directors. So I try to support the cause as much as possible. And at Healx also beyond neurofibromatosis, because you start with one and then you really do understand how much is a special community that it's really worth to put our energy on. And if you can show a couple of things about us with the slides, maybe I can quickly take you through. I'm not sure if you are sharing right now. I guess so, right? But if you, yes, I can see it now. Thank you very much. If you can go to the next. So I'm going to spend few words on what we do and how we do at Healx, and but most importantly on why we do what we do. Healx was funded by Tim Gilliams and Dave Brown a few years back with this picture exactly in mind: 7,000 rare diseases, 95% don't have a treatment, 400 million patients worldwide, and half of them are children. And that's essentially the engine that fuels us every day to try to find treatments for as many patients as possible. And if you can go to the next, you can see that our mission is simple, perhaps a little bit more challenging to achieve, but the mission is using artificial intelligence to identify and progress novel rare disease treatments at scale. So that's where we focus. And if you can go to the next, I wanted just to quickly show you how we do it, right? There are three key pillars for us. One is the rare disease patients and the patient groups, because for us, they are extremely important to understand what's their real need, and also for us to have all the necessary information to predict the best possible treatment for them. So that's number one for us. Number two is our artificial intelligence and machine learning technology. So from one end, you have thousands and thousands and thousands of compounds that are used for many diseases. From the other end, you have the unique profile of a rare disease, and what we do is we match one with the other via artificial intelligence to come up with the best treatment possible. And the third one is drug discovery expertise, because these essentially train our machine learning models, number one, and secondly, all our experts are the ones that they can really pick up then the best possible compounds / treatments / combination of treatments for rare diseases patients. And if you can go to the next slide, I just wanted to quickly talk you through our rare treatment accelerator. You can see here in the picture Bruce Bloom. He's going to be available later on in the stand, and he can take any question from you. Bruce is our Chief Collaboration Officer, and I would define him as the father of the Rare Treatment Accelerator, which is essentially a program where we welcome partnerships from patient groups, from academics, and also from other biotechs that like us want to essentially to focus on rare diseases. And we are we are essentially driven by the belief that together with all the skills, with all the know-how, with all the information, we can further accelerate treatments. And if you go then to the next, essentially, I wanted just to quickly tell you what you can expect from our program. So one is speed, because we can accelerate treatments and move them from preclinical to clinical trials very, very fast. The other one is funding. And of course, we cannot pick up all the rare diseases at once. That's quite obvious, right? We have some selection criteria that are quite important for us to decide which ones we have the best opportunity essentially to find possible treatment for. But for those one that we decided to tackle, this is where we will put all the funding then that is necessary for regulatory approvals, clinical trials, and so on. And the third one is expertise. We have expertise in technology. We have expertise in all the drug diseases, and then we also have expertise in translating them into therapy for patients. And usually, this expertise it's complementary with all the expertise that patient groups are bringing, academics are bringing, and other companies are bringing. So. You're welcome to apply, to ask us more, and let's keep in touch and let's keep pushing. Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you, Simone. And finally, our third panelist is Maria Picone from the TREND community. So Maria, over to you.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you, Simone and Rudy, also for all the work that you're doing. I'm just pulling up my slides. Can everybody see that? So, my name is Maria Picone, and I am the co-founder and CEO of a digital health analytics company called Trend Community. I'm also mom to an 8-year-old who was born with a rare genetic disease called Prader-Willi syndrome. And after our daughter was diagnosed, I joined a group on social media for caregivers of children with PWS. And really, that was the first time that I truly had hope, because I realized that so much more was possible for a child born today with this rare condition than doctors and the medical literature had led me to believe. Parents were using diet and supplements, but also off-label and experimental medications to manage the symptoms of PWS. And it appeared that many were positively impacting the health outcomes of their children. And so my husband, Chris, and I, we thought that if we could just pull these insights out of those conversations, that we could better understand how to most effectively manage this disease and ensure that our daughter would have the best possible outcome. And so this was the inspiration for Trend, where we're using data analytics to turn patient and caregiver conversations into powerful data. So using social listening, natural language processing, and machine learning techniques, we can quickly understand the community's history, their challenges, and their unique vocabulary. So here on the screen, I just have the definitions of those terms because we throw around these technical terms, but just so that everybody understands. Social listening is the process of tracking mentions of certain words and phrases across social media and then analyzing them. Natural language processing is a type of artificial intelligence that allows computers to break down and process human language. And then machine learning is how we train the computer to automatically process and understand vast amounts of conversation data. So how does it work? So a lot of companies are using social listening to understand the psychology and behavior of their consumers, but they're mostly limited to public data sources such as Twitter and Reddit. But due to the unique challenges of rare and chronic disease, we're all creating these disease-specific social networks like the group that I joined after our daughter was born, where we support one another and share personal stories. And these conversations contain very rich details that can provide a more complete view of patient experience than clinicians and researchers can gather using traditional methods alone. And so what makes Trend unique, is that we partner with these patient communities who invite us into their closed social networks. Privacy, of course, is very important to us. We only analyze the anonymized conversation data, which means that the posts and comments can never be linked back to the individual authors. And then our analytics engine pulls out the trending topics of conversation, and using a custom taxonomy or classification system, it organizes these concepts by disease burden, disease management techniques, and other important terms which we can use to identify unmet needs of the community. So again, just to dig a little bit more into how it works, my daughter's disease is characterized by obesity and something called hyperphagia, which is a chronic insatiable hunger. And yet when we did social listening with our community, we found that caregivers were talking more about issues related to sleep than they were talking about hunger and obesity. So on the left-hand side, we have examples of conversation snippets. These are just paraphrased, as we never share the raw conversation data. And you can see how terms that pop up in the text on the left then are compiled into data on the right. And again, you can see that conversations about being fatigued, tired, and sleepy bubble up higher than hunger and obesity. So then we ask ourselves if we can further analyze the conversation data in order to understand something more specific about the disease. And so in this case, we wanted to know whether or not we could better understand how disordered sleep was specifically impacting the PWS community. And so in partnership with pediatric neurologists at Texas Children's Hospital, we trained our analytics engine to identify terms related to disordered sleep. And we did that by working with these neurologists who described what disordered sleep looked like from a clinical perspective in this patient population. And then we could train the engine to look for those terms within the conversation. So again, conversation data on the left, and then on the right, you can see that people are talking about issues related to another rare disease called narcolepsy, and cataplexy, which is a symptom of narcolepsy, in both using those terms, but also other terms like head bobbing and imbalance issues and fainting. So at Trend, we then compile all of this data into what we call a community voice report, and this is given back to the community. It will also be shared forward with our clients and regulators potentially. And patient communities can use these reports to inform your medical and support teams, to say, hey, my daughter's experiencing issues of narcolepsy, and this is actually a problem within our community. Will you please do a daytime sleep study so that we can find out whether or not she's experiencing narcolepsy? You can use it to educate family members, catalyze research that's most important to you, and also to spread awareness and advocacy. And that's all. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for sharing such a good introduction to yourselves. Maybe my first question will be to Rudy, just to understand a little bit your technology. If you can explain it in layman's term, how your AI works, that would be brilliant, because we'd like to know sort of how does it work, and how does it actually help rare diseases in particular?
Of course, yes. Thanks for this question. So, if you ask doctors and experts, why is it so difficult to diagnose a rare disease, they would probably give you, often they will give you two main reasons. And these have to do with the clinical patterns of these diseases. The first one is that the diseases are mostly quite progressive, which means that the signs and symptoms are going to appear throughout a long period of time. And the second one is that most of them are multi-systemic patterns, which means that we look at medicine in silos because it's just the way that it's been done, and we have specialists for different systems in the body. But it turns out that rare disease patients can have ailments in many different systems. And when we think about this, we really understand very clearly why is it so difficult for sometimes doctors to put two and two together. Because it's difficult to, we can't expect from doctors to know 8,000 different patterns that are very disparate, that throughout the time will appear over long years, and that won't call for any specialty. So, when we looked at this, we realized that the generalist, the GP, was really our best chance to act as early as possible. And the second thing that we realized is there's this term used sometime in the rare disease community called the doubt culture. It's this idea that you need to kind of pique the interest of the doctor to ask themselves whether they're in front of a rare disease patient. And this is just something that is extremely difficult, because just systemically, in order to do this, you just constantly have to be next to the doctor and poke them and say, hey, but could this be rare, or could this be rare? And this is really what the problem is. And so by looking at these aspects, we really came to a solution that in a way was going to encompass all of these challenges and put something in place. And so when we describe what we do, the technology, what we like to say is, at the end of the day, we can solve the problem if we make sure that we provide the right information at the right time to the right doctor, in a way. And the way to do this is to have almost of a what we call almost an alert, right? An alert or a scanning system. And so we go into medical practices, in GP practices, let's say, or CCG, which happen to be groupings of GP practices in the UK. And we look at the medical records of these patients over the last, whatever they have. In most cases in the UK, it's almost 15 to 20 years of data. So we have this breadth of kind of scanning ability. And on the other side, we look at existing kind of criteria. We call them digital clinical criteria, really. They're the criteria that already exist for these diseases. We know that if these patients have these signs and symptoms, they should be seen by a particular specialist. In most cases, these criteria exist in medical books or sometimes in the brains of the top doctors in our countries who know how to do this. But as medicine becomes more and more digital, we need to find a way to apply these criteria at scale, almost at a population health level. And effectively, this is what we're doing. We're taking all of that knowledge and creating these digital clinical criteria that we can then apply automatically, kind of almost without the doctor knowing, that we're constantly checking in the background whether some of their patients are breaching these criteria. And when they do, we need to alert the doctor. We need to let them know. And at this point, the idea is not to say, oh, doctor, you have a patient and they have this disease. The goal is to say, doctor, you have a patient that has breached this clinical criteria that exists for these and these reasons. This is what may happen to this patient, because there is a chance that they have this disease that at this point the doctor may have never heard of before. So giving a little bit of awareness, a little bit of education, just for that specific rare disease at this moment when the doctor needs to review the patient, really makes it work. And this is really the system that we've built. And so the technology really works in how to summarize the data that already exists for these criteria, then encoding them in a digital format, and then being able to scan these medical records at scale, so that we can then send these clinical reports to GPs all around the UK by letting them know, hey, doctor, there is this patient that warrants further investigation. This is what would happen. This is the clinical pathway, and these are the next steps within the clinical pathway that would work. So by having this system that is, very kind of low burden for the doctor, because it's just a matter of reviewing a clinical file. Sometimes it takes them 2 to 5 minutes. Just, sparking this light bulb moment for the doctor, being like, oh yeah, indeed, I've seen this patient coming to my practice 18 times over the last 6 months, and I have never considered that. And this is the feedback that we're getting from the doctors. Sometimes they tell us, thank you very much for the tip. I actually happen to know this patient, and for whatever reason, the suggestion is not really what you suggested. And sometimes they tell us, thank you very much. I have just recalled that patient, or I've just spent the last 20 minutes reading about this particular disease, and it may explain some of the signs and symptoms of that patient. So, I've dropped them a message, or I've put a note in the clinical record so that next time the patient comes to see me, we can have a conversation about it. So overall, this is kind of the way that we can and we do reduce this diagnosis odyssey in a very high level terms.
And Rudy, just following that, before I jump onto other, we've had questions from the audience on how has it been used specifically by NHS? So you're saying that at the moment your NHS doctor do this. How have you managed to have a partnership with the NHS to do this?
Yeah, so I think the question, how have we managed to get the partnership with the NHS, is still up in the air. I don't know how we managed to do it, but we did it, and it was a very lengthy process. I'm half joking here. The idea with the NHS is I like to say this is, there is no way to hack the NHS. You know, like you're not going to hack your way in. It's just not how it works. They're very clear. If you really listen to what the NHS, the commissioners, and all of these, you know, people that are commissioning care are saying, they really care about a few things, and you have to tick the boxes. And we have spent a very long time, efforts, and sweat to tick these boxes. They want to know if what you're doing is safe. They want to know if what you're doing is low risk. They want to know if what you're doing is ethically okay. They want to know if it's cost efficient, and in some cases, if it's cost effective. And so we just went through all of these hoops, one after the other. We commissioned an ethics study with the University of Cambridge. It's 40 pages long. I invite anyone to go and read it on our website. That looks at what it means ethically to look at medical records in the background to find some of these patients. We then did a health economic study. It was in Per College this time. Again, it's a 60 pages long study that looks at what it means to diagnose these undiagnosed or misdiagnosed patients and what it would mean in terms of budget and cost utilization for the NHS. We went through all of the regulatory, all of the compliance processes by going through, you know, the right third parties, making sure that all of the process was completely tight. And just by slowly understanding, you know, what is it that they want and what is it that we can provide, then we're getting there. I would add that, you know, I think we got lucky to have these clinical champions that really understand what the rare diseases is all about. And people usually tell me, oh, but if they don't know about it, is it not hard to convince them? And this is important to understand that it's the other way around. It's because they don't know about them that it's easier to convince them. Because if we had tools that could diagnose Alzheimer's disease, then, you know, you get the standard feedback of like, you know, I know how to do this. I know how to diagnose hypertension. This is my job. I don't need someone to help me do that. But when you tell them that you're going to help them to diagnose Fabry disease, that is 1 in 127,000 in the UK, it's going to be very difficult for that doctor to argue that they know very well what the diagnostic criteria for Fabry disease patients is. And they really like that. They really like this investigative approach. In most cases, this is why they got into medicine. It's, you know, they're almost very proud of having this case that they're going to have, you know, they're going to be able to spend time and help that particular patient. I'll stop
Thank
there.
you.
I want to let other people speak.
Simone, if I can go into, you know, Maria talked about the importance of patient groups, and I know you're heavily involved in that at Healx. Can you say, how can that help the actual technology? How does patient involvement, patient groups help technology development?
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me start with also with what Rudy was saying as well, so let's start with the diagnosis as well, right? So in patient groups here can be extremely helpful in raising awareness of a specific disease of interest, right? Each group for the disease that they're trying to tackle. So that's number one. And I give you just a basic example. I know neurofibromatosis quite well. Kids have these what you call café au lait spots. So these spots in their body, right? If you have more than 6 that are bigger than a certain size, it's almost a given that you are diagnosed with neurofibromatosis type 1. And you can't imagine in how many countries yet the GPs don't know this. And it's relatively simple, right? Because they are actually looking at many diseases that they have to tackle. So I'm not going to blame them. So what Rudy was saying before, it's extremely important. So that's number one, where I think that patient groups can be extremely helpful. Number two is, of course, is the patient care, patient advocacy, and so on. And then, Caroline, going to your question, right? When it comes also for us and what we do at Healx, from technology into ultimately lending treatments to rare disease patients, is for us is, okay, number one is that they know the disease from a perspective that we don't know the disease. So, and if you really want to have patient-driven therapies, you really need to listen. And it's hard sometimes to listen to each single patient in the globe. And a patient group can be an extremely good voice to essentially collect all of these and really help you understand what treatment would help them. So that's number one. Number two, it's that historically, in many cases, depending, of course, from at what level they are and at what essentially stage they are. But in many cases, they have funded a lot of studies that are now public. And they are public, and they give you the natural history of the disease. And they give you all the underlying data for us, essentially, to be picked and then to be used by our own technology then to come up with the best possible prediction. So data, it's extremely important as well. Number three, they can, and I have a long list, so stop me when you want. But number three, they can help you to navigate an environment which sometimes is quite hard, right? Who are the top clinicians, and where are the best preclinical centers? Can you put us in touch? How does it work? And where should I do this testing versus that, and so on. And finally, also on the clinical landscape, they know all the key opinion leaders for a specific rare disease, and they sometimes helped to set up clinical care networks that are extremely important when you want to try to access the trials to find out if there is a match and an interest for our trials. So they are key for us at every single stage. And I would also argue that if there wasn't in the world all the work that has been done by a lot of patient groups, companies like Healx wouldn't be able to strive, because we wouldn't find all the conditions around to apply our methods to then try to support a given rare disease.
And Maria, on that one, and if I build on what you've told us before on how your AI technology works, it's clear that listening with the social media background that you have and so on, it touches data privacy, and this is something that we've received a question on, and I wanted to know how do you address that, that dilemma of having, in rare diseases, there may not be that many people with saying these comments, so and they may be worried about the privacy of their comments. How do you address that?
Yeah, as Rudy mentioned before, these things take a lot of time to develop, and we've worked through these challenges over the last few years. As a parent, obviously that's important to me. I want to back up 1 second though, to say that Rudy and Simone are both talking about how they're using what is known about a disease to accelerate diagnosis and the development of treatments. And so what the problem that we're solving for is that I believe there's not a complete, understanding even of the most well-known rare diseases, such as my daughter. She doesn't fit the clinical picture. So that's why I think it's important to be able to do this, but also to be able to do it in a way that respects the privacy of the community members. So, just by nature of being on social media, whatever you're talking about and saying, it's out there. People are analyzing these data. There are lots of tools available to the administrators of the group to do this kind of analytics. We're just partnering with those administrators to take advantage of those tools. So we're using, most of the rare disease groups are on Facebook. I mean, that's like the most popular place for people to come together and share. We have an approved application that the administrator can install within the group. And then it's really important that we're transparent about what we're doing. So we work with the administrators to have a conversation with the group, let them know who we are, what we want to do, that we're partnering together, that the data will go back to the community. I mean, that's also important. This isn't just us taking the data and, giving it to a client. The data needs to go back to the community, and if a client wants to work with us, that's important for them to understand that these data do go out into the public domain. And then, unfortunately, we can't get consent from every single person, and we are working with groups where people can opt in, where we do have access to the community members. So in groups who have developed these social networks outside of, Facebook, for example. But in the case of something like Facebook, we just want to get a general consensus. At the end of the day, it's at the discretion of the administrator to move forward with the project. But for this reason, we have to be very careful about what we're accessing. So we don't want access to any of the profile information. We don't want to know who these people are. And you saw the output, it's very high level. It's hypothesis generating. So there's a lot more that we can do if we can track conversation over time and connect it back to a specific user. But we're not doing that in the case of something like Facebook because of the considerations for privacy. I'm always happy to also talk about this more offline because it's very complicated.
I'm conscious we're running out of time. There's a lot of questions and I'm struggling to see how we could possibly answer them, but maybe a quick one for Rudy that came up in that ties in with the conversation we just had, which is how do patients group get their conditions included in your AI? So how is there, how you know, by definition, them being rare, do you have any of that?
They reach out. They please reach out by all means. Every time we look at a new disease, and today we have almost between 50 and 60 already in our kind of scope of scanning, let's say. But by all means, yes, I'll make this one quick. Reach out every time we start a new disease. It's a requirement to reach out to the patient group and the patient advocacy group. It's a requirement to understand the patient perspective. It's a requirement to have them at the table for us as we develop and as we update these digital criteria that exist. Not only the experts, not only the other stakeholders, the NHS, the pharma group, also the patient advocacy group need to be at the table. So by all means, send me a message, talk to me on the chat. I'm available on every platform.
And Maria, another one, a quick one. I'm just trying to quick fire some questions that we have. Similarly, how do you find it easy, or do you get any patient group that are skeptical to have you involved?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting much easier. Like I said, over the years, we've developed messaging so that we can convey, very succinctly to the groups, again, who we are, what we want to do. At this point, our success rate is very high. Of course, every now and then there's a group that decides that it's not a good fit for them. But I mean, honestly, we haven't had in quite a long time a group that hasn't want to participate. And the thing is, we have about 40 communities that are waiting to work with us. So it's kind of like, we're sort of catering to people who want to do this. So I think that's part of it as well. We have people coming to us.
And Simone, a question for you specifically. People are interested to know why an F-1. It's fairly common in South Africa, apparently. What made you advocate this condition particularly?
I'm not sure if it's for me as a person, and then also for Healx. For me as a person, because it's part of my family. So, and it's a condition that lives with us. So, and I'll stop it there for the moment. And that's obviously the driver of many people like me and Maria to start a certain journey. It's part of our lives. And for Healx, because we got in touch a few years ago with Healx and we started brainstorming, and it was the beginning of a fantastic journey together, which then led me to work with Healx at the end. And I'm honored by the way that they are having someone like with my profile actually to lead such an effort. I think it's a sign also of their commitment to truly listen to patients, and also because NF1 specifically ticks all the boxes that I was referring before. For Healx to say, okay, you know what? For this condition, we can really give it a try, and that's what we are doing, because it ticks the boxes on the preclinical. There are enough information for Healx. There are also good centers where we can carry out our test, the preclinical test, and then also there is an established clinical network, whereas then we can think, hey, we could really do a trial here because there is a need. There is the knowledge, and we can try.
And I think I'm going to finish. We've got 1 minute left, but if I'll say who wants to jump into the fact that how do you think learnings from COVID-19 somehow has helped rare diseases? That's another question I was asked on the chat.
I mean, I think COVID-19 has helped the world relate a little bit more to rare disease, right? I mean, to have a condition that is not well understood, for which there are not known treatments, and that, you know, diagnosis is difficult. I mean, I'll pass it off to the other two, but I think it's very similar to rare disease at this very moment in time.
I can just say a wish from my side that if there was a fraction of the interest for rare diseases that there has been for COVID, and a fraction of resources, we would save many, many, many lives and improve them. So I also hope so. Yeah.
Rudy?
I don't have much to add. I think I'll leave it on an optimistic note. Clearly, I think we're going in the right direction, and I think a lot of what has happened recently, you know, is showing the interest for more digital, more efficient care for everyone, and that can only benefit rare diseases community as well. So I'm pretty excited about the future.
Well, thank you all. I really enjoyed this discussion. I wish it continued, and hopefully there will be plenty of opportunity with RAREfest to continue these conversation and grow on them over the years. It's fascinating. So thank you so much for participating.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye. Bye. Take care.